When you got back to the UK, you were in the Nationals, placed second, but more importantly, perhaps, the country honoured you for your achievements, firstly with the Royal Aero Club's gold medal, which I might point out is only awarded for outstanding achievements. And you joined the ranks of previous aviators like the Wright brothers, Blériot, Alcock and Brown, even the Apollo 11 astronauts. A fine company. That was a remarkable thing to be given, yes?
Yes, I was honoured to get a lot of different honours, medals, Nick. I don't have an awful lot of huge memory points from those presentations, apart from they were given by different members of the royal family, many of them. Prince Charles gave a couple, Prince Andrew gave a couple, and Prince Philip gave, I believe from memory, the Air League Founders Medal. So that was absolutely wonderful. But one award was the MBE, and interestingly, it was actually awarded on the civil list as opposed to the military list. So Maren and my mother and I, of course, in my best uniform, went off to Buckingham Palace to receive that, and that was a great honour. But no tremendous memories from the day. A lot of people were getting a lot of different things. So, yeah, but nonetheless, great honour.
Well, while we're on the subject of the royal family, 78 saw you at RAF Bicester for a number of flights with royalty, and you took Prince Charles, then I guess a reasonably young man, the heir to the throne, up in a Grob, I believe. Did he enjoy himself?
He did, Nick. It was a private visit, so the man could actually relax. He didn't have a lot of hangers-on. It was very informal. I remember waiting out by the entrance gates at Bicester for his arrival and looking and seeing this open-top Aston Martin coming down the road. And there was HRH at the wheel with his private detective lounging on the back seat. But the intention was to do a 100-kilometer triangular cross-country course. And it would have been wonderful. I felt very disappointed because the British weather just did not cooperate. There was no way we were going cross-country, just impossible. And I often wondered what it would have been like had we gone and landed out, and curious people might have come and said, has anybody ever told you you look remarkably like Prince Charles?
Oh, that would have been great.
But anyway, we did a lot of aerobatics. At one stage I thought, dare I do a beat up with the heir to the throne? Well, never mind, my career is at stake, but here we go. So blasted off down the airfield and did a beat up at very low level, pulled up and landed. On one downwind landing, again below normal minimum circling altitude, I felt, got a little bit of lift here. Dare I throw a turn? Oh, what the heck, I will. And it was enough, and it hooked into it and it developed. And we actually climbed up to 3,000 feet from fairly low altitude. So at least it gave him a little taste of what gliding is about. He loved it. I think he really enjoyed it. And he's got a wonderful sense of humor, Prince Charles. We went in for our lunch break and I was ushering him into what is normally the briefing room, and all laid out with the finest silver and linen and everything else for HRH. He stopped at the doorway, had a quick look around and turned around, and he said to me, I suppose it's always like this, isn't it? I thought that was priceless. No,
very good indeed.
It was a lovely visit, Nick.
Can I move forward now to the defence of your World Championship, this time in France? Unless there's anything else you particularly want to cover in the lead up to that. But how did that competition go?
I had the same regular loyal crew chief, a different crew member, but they knew each other well. No problems there. We went to a French Air Force base called Romorantin for the pre-practice period practice. So I had a lot of time, and the weather was dreadful. It rained and rained. So we polished and fettled and polished and fettled. The glider was perfect. And towards the very last day, suddenly the sun came out. And wow, we got the glider ready, towed out to the launch point. The French towed their gliders out. There was a French civil gliding club there as well. And they parked them and off they went. This was lunchtime. This is the French lunch. It's very serious. And the tug pilot came out and he parked his plane and he was about to go off for lunch. I couldn't believe it. I went over and said, please, just one tow before lunch. And bless him, he gave in. And I went and did 600 kilometers or something. And the French came out after their lunch and flew 250, 300. So I do recall that. The event itself was probably the most straightforward of the World Championships. The weather was generally consistent, not booming, strong weather, but good, solid, consistent weather. On one memorable day, I was the only person of any class, there were 3 classes by now, to actually get home. And that was the most marginal final glide I've ever had in my life. We topped up at the top of a fire that was going. Other gliders were way down low. There's no way they're getting home. And I milked it for all I could and set off for Chateauroux, which was the big French airfield with monster runways and parallel taxiways. I had a Belgian open class pilot off my left wing, but he was a bit lower and he wasn't going to make it for sure. And I didn't think I was going to make it, and I just pressed on, looking at the instruments, any movement of the air, just gently following it, until finally I saw I was going to creep over the airfield boundary. The only problem was there's still 2 kilometers of concrete before the finish line. Minor problem. So I just, squeezed the buttocks and carried on and on and on, floating until finally I'm not going to scrape the belly of the glider. I just have to drop the gear now. So I dropped it and touched and just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. It's fortunately a smooth surface, and they even able to apply a tiny bit of air brake having crossed the finish line. So that was a very memorable day.
I was going to call you a bit of a show off there, Josh, but that is remarkable. That should be squeeze it over the line like that. That's brilliant.
The final day worked as it should work. My open class teammate, the same guy, he was out of contention. So he was quite legally helping me to maintain my overall lead. So he was a certain number of kilometers ahead, and by code, he was reporting back thermal strength. So that was helpful to a reasonable degree at least. And I think I got 3rd for the day, which was enough to cement the overall victory.
Now, you quite rightly received many accolades for your 2nd World Championship in a row, but the icing on the cake, perhaps, you were invited to the palace again, this time to dine with the royal family. What a lovely thing that must have been.
Now that was very, very special. That actually happened in '79, and the telegram arrived when we were in Cyprus, I recall. So I flew back, and this was a very different event and so much more meaningful, to be perfectly honest. There were 10 guests, and then, of course, the Queen and Prince Philip. So we waited in this huge, big lounge room waiting for Her Majesty to arrive, and heard the corgis yapping, here she comes. So in she comes, and there's a little group around her, and every so often one person would get a gentle tug on the elbow, and that person would be just slid out of the group and another person slid in. The lunch itself, of course, was special in a lovely little room. I was seated next to the Bishop of Oxford, I recall. But the one thing I do remember, I was feeling pretty nervous, not I really was. But the one thing I do remember was a very animated conversation between Claire Francis, the yachtswoman of fame, with Prince Philip. She was certainly not nervous. But then afterwards, after the lunch, this is where it got special for me, because we had the same setup after the lunch in this lounge room. And to this day, I cannot remember how it happened, but somehow I ended up with just the Queen and myself side by side at the front window of this lounge room, this big bay window looking up the mall. And we were watching preparations being made for a state visit the following week. And we were just chatting as you would to a neighbor over a fence. It was absolutely remarkable. So that was just so wonderful. She's a wonderful woman, absolutely wonderful.
Well, George, it seems that the RAF, in their wisdom, were going to give one of their finest pilots a ground tour. But then again, if you're going to have a ground tour, the one you were given has to be, an absolutely wonderful thing to do. You were on the tactical leadership program in Germany, weren't you?
Yes, Nick, you've summed that up very well. It was indeed a very special tour, quite extraordinary in so many ways. Firstly, well, it was on a German Air Force base itself, under the unit TLP under a German commandant with a multinational staff, one Belgian, German, and then Brits and Americans. The TLP was actually under AFSI as opposed to NATO. That's Allied Air Force of Central Europe. The main difference being that AFSI didn't have any money. But anyway, the program itself was superb. There's no other way to describe it. And prior to going on staff, I actually went and did the course myself with my regular navigator. We went over there to the base, which was called Jever, up in the far north of Germany, not that far from the North Sea, actually. And the course was multi-mission. We had 6 air defense aircraft on each course and then 12 ground attack aircraft. And we started off with the gentle stuff, a bit of medium level, dissimilar air combat, all of that sort of stuff before bringing the serious stuff on down into the low level regime. And the air defenders would be mounting their cap, waiting for the ground attack package to come through. And when they see them, launch at them. So the mission intensity and complexity developed as the course went on. And towards the latter part of the course, they actually brought in the American aggressors, which was tremendous because the aggressors is a specialist American unit flying F-5s, painted in full Soviet color scheme. And the tactics that they employed were Soviet tactics, and they were very disciplined in doing that. So from a training value perspective, the aggressors were magnificent unit to train in, very, very realistic. But having mentioned the aggressor, there was one incident we had when I was on staff. Actually, the aggressors were out there on their own little cap waiting for the ground attack package. And one of the aggressor pilots, he didn't see the package until very late. It was visual lookout. The F-5 doesn't have look down radar. He saw them very late, rolled over, pulled down to get in behind them. Only he misjudged the pull down and he overcooked it, didn't pull hard enough, I guess. And he saw the ground looming up at a rather remarkably disturbing rate. And he carried on and he actually glanced the earth. He impacted, but only a glancing blow, back up and ejected.
Oh, good Lord. What an amazing thing, within an inch of death.
Well, quite so. I don't know, incredible. But the course itself, I could feel myself when I did the course getting sharper each mission. It was that environment, just tremendous flying, exciting, adrenaline pumping flying.
And flying with some of the best pilots picked from each of the air forces.
Normal squadron operational pilots, I would say, but it was an environment where they were away from all the squadron pressures and stuff, and we gelled, bonded well together, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And an amazing variety of aircraft types actually would come on the course. A huge number, from A-10 Warthogs all the way up F-15s, even F-1s, and everything in between. And these nations were encouraged to please bring along two-seaters so the staff members could actually get airborne on these missions, because otherwise one is relying on pilot reports, which probably a little bit less than fully accurate at times.
So you got some flying in.
I got to fly in a tremendous range of two-seat aircraft.
Excellent.
Harrier, Mirage, F-16. My favorite by far was the F-15. I fell in love with that aircraft and I thought, oh, why didn't we buy the F-15? It was just gorgeous. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. So a great experience. And in between courses, we were required to keep current on our own types. So I went down to Wildenrath and flew the F-4. The squadrons were given that little bit of extra hours allowance, and I alternated between 19 and 92 squadron, and they were very generous and in hosting me, so I'm very appreciative of that.
Well, it sounded like a great time you had. You were able to get into the American PX and buy all their wonderful steaks and even come home with a duty-free car. I didn't feel jealous at all up there in northern Scotland. So the TLP was actually not far from where you were going to fly the next, your third World Championship. So that must have been quite handy.